Hi, my name is Juliana, I'm 29 years old, and all of this happened just before my 30th birthday, that age that, for some reason, everyone seems to think should mark the beginning of real life. 30 sounds almost solemn, like a new chapter, a milestone after which you suddenly need to figure everything out, get everything done, get everything organized. I work as a software developer at a large tech company, with an office right in the city center. The work may not be the most exciting to an outsider: code, bugs, fixes, releases, reports, but it's stable, predictable, and, perhaps, provides a sense of support. 2 years ago, I was able to buy my own apartment, albeit with a mortgage, but still with its own smell of morning coffee and the sound of footsteps that belonged to no one else. I've been working at this company for about 6 years now, and in that time, so much has become familiar, down to the smallest detail. The familiar route to the office, the familiar faces of my colleagues, the familiar flickering of the monitor in the dim light of late evening. Sometimes I feel like I live inside code, lines, logic, order. Everything is predictable, everything follows the rules, and perhaps this is, in many ways, a continuation of who I was as a child: responsible, quiet, diligent. I always got good grades, never broke the rules, was never late, didn't take risks, I did everything right. But Chiara, my younger sister, is completely different. She's 24, 5 years younger than me, and has always been, well, the youngest in every sense of the word. You know how it is. The younger ones are the eternal favorites of the family, no one gets mad at them, their pranks are attributed to their age, their personality, or that's just how she is. Everything they do somehow seems charming. It's not that I ever truly envied her, it's just that over the years, I've begun to notice how subtly, almost imperceptibly, the differences between us are forming. But no, I'm not offended, or, at least, I wasn't before. My parents, Federica and Cristiano, live in the suburbs, in the very house where we both grew up. My mother works part-time as a receptionist at a dental clinic, and my father has been in sales for years, always on the phone, always with a notepad, his constant smile hiding the weariness of clients, schedules, and plans. We're an ordinary middle-class family, without any particular ambitions, without any pretensions, just people whose kitchen always smells of coffee and bread, whose TV hums in the living room, even when no one's watching. Chiara still lives with them. In fact, I was also once in no hurry to leave after college, but that's a whole other story. 2 weeks before my birthday, I was sitting quietly in my apartment with a cup of tea, looking out the window at the gray autumn city, and thinking about how I wanted to celebrate this day. I didn't want a party with a crowd of acquaintances and semi-acquaintances, noisy toasts and awkward conversations. I wanted something simple and real, an evening with just my closest friends, my family. One place immediately popped into my head: Giovanni Restaurant, a small Italian spot we used to go to when I was a child. It seems like it's been around forever, cozy, with warm light, the scent of garlic, basil, and fresh dough. They make that same chicken parmesan that I first tried when I was 10 years old and order every time since, as if stepping back in time. We only went there on special occasions, birthdays, graduations, the rare holidays when everyone was suddenly in the same mood. And now, as my 30th birthday approached, I thought it might be best to celebrate it there, not as the beginning of a new chapter, but as a return to something familiar, to something that never changes. I picked up the phone and called my mother. The ringing continued for a long time before she answered. "Hi, darling, what's up?" There was a slight distraction in her voice, and the TV was playing in the background, as it always did in the evenings. "Hi, Mom, I wanted to talk about my birthday," I said, trying to sound cheerful. "I was thinking maybe we could all go to Giovanni's together. Just the family, you, Dad, Chiara, and me. I'll make reservations for 6 o'clock this evening, Saturday, the 14th. "Of course, darling," she replied after a pause. "It sounds tempting, we'll be there." That's all, no excitement, no extra words. Maybe she was just tired after work, I thought, or distracted. I tried not to pay attention to it. After hanging up, I opened my messenger and messaged Chiara. "Hi, the gala dinner at Giovanni's is on the 14th at 6 o'clock. Are you coming?" The reply came quickly. "Yes, of course, I'll be there." And again, no exclamation points, no familiar emojis, no warm undertone, just short and dry, but at least she confirmed it. I booked a table for 4, feeling surprisingly confident in my decision, as if everything had finally fallen into place, simple, calm, without unnecessary drama, with a slight inner joy that I had this small but still important reason to bring my family together. The next 2 weeks flew by in a whirlwind of activities, and I threw myself headlong into preparations. Although I tried not to turn it into the celebration of the century, I just wanted the evening to be warm and memorable, not for the fuss, but for the feeling of intimacy. I went shopping, trying on dozens of dresses until I stumbled upon one, a deep navy blue, soft, flowing, as if designed to hide flaws and highlight assets. It wasn't pretentious, but there was something special about it, understated elegance, confidence, a little mystery. It cost more than I usually spend on clothes, but I said to myself, well, why not? 30 only comes once in a lifetime. I got a haircut, not a big one, but enough to feel renewed, as if some of the fatigue I'd accumulated over the past few months had vanished along with the ends of my hair. I even made an appointment for a manicure, although I usually do it myself in the evenings before watching TV. I wanted to be well-groomed, to feel like a woman who doesn't just live, but chooses how to live. Work didn't give me time to be bored. The project we were working on as a team was approaching its final stage, and I was returning home late, with tired eyes and a racing mind, but perhaps that was for the best. There was no room for worry or anticipation. My colleagues kept asking how I planned to celebrate my anniversary, and when I mentioned a family dinner, many smiled approvingly. That's so sweet, they said. These days, everyone wants grand parties, but you just want an evening with your family, and I agreed, because that's exactly what I wanted. No show, no pretense, just together. I woke up in a good mood on my birthday. It was Saturday, the early March sun softly flooded the room, and the air held that rare transparency that only spring brings, when everything seems to be preparing for renewal. I leisurely made breakfast, cleaned the apartment, started the laundry, and then simply sat with a cup of coffee by the window, looking out at the city, which was living its own life, full of movement and sounds. Around 3, I began getting ready. I took a long shower, applied cream, dried my hair, and applied my makeup carefully, with attention to detail, as if this ritual weren't just preparation, but a way to connect with myself, to affirm who I am. When I put on my new blue dress and looked in the mirror, I thought I looked dignified, not like a girl who'd just turned 20, but like a woman who'd lived long enough to know her worth. I arrived at Giovanni's a little early, about 10 minutes before the appointed time. The elderly owner, the same one who always greets guests at the entrance, recognized me immediately, and for some reason this touched me, as if all this time I'd remained part of something constant, warm, and familiar. She led me to a table by the window, set for 4, a white tablecloth, shiny glasses, fresh flowers in a vase. The restaurant was filled with a familiar aroma: garlic, basil, freshly baked bread, and for a second I felt like a child, sitting at that very table with my parents and Chiara, back when we were all still laughing and sharing dessert. I ordered a glass of wine to while away the wait, and, looking at the clock, I felt a quiet anticipation fill my stomach. 6 o'clock struck, but no one was in sight. I checked my phone, no messages, no missed calls. Strange, I thought maybe we were stuck in traffic. It was Saturday evening, after all, and the roads were jammed. Another 10 minutes passed, nothing. I began to fidget in my seat, pretending to simply admire the view from the window. At 6:15, I felt anxious for the first time. I called my mom. It rang, then silence, then voicemail. I tried my dad, same thing. I called Chiara, no answer. I messaged in the family chat, "Hi, I'm already at the restaurant, where are you guys?" And still nothing. A waiter approached me, a young man named Michel. I knew him by sight. He'd worked here for years and was always polite, attentive, and almost old-fashioned. He smiled softly, leaning toward the table. "Would you like to order an appetizer while you wait for the rest of the guests, Signora Giuliana?" I caught something in his gaze, perhaps sympathy, perhaps awkwardness, but it still left an unpleasant pang. Maybe I'll wait a couple more minutes," I said, smiling tensely, as if reassuring him and myself that everything was under control. By 6:30, my anxiety had begun to turn to fear. I called again, Mom, Dad, Chiara, to no avail. All sorts of thoughts swirled in my head. What if there's an accident? What if something happened? I wrote another message, Mom, I'm worried, please answer and let me know you're okay. 10 agonizing minutes passed, people laughed at the nearby tables, glasses clinked, waiters scurried back and forth, and in this noise I felt strangely transparent, as if no one noticed me, save for the occasional pitiful glance. A woman sat alone at a large table, holding a phone and a tense smile on her face. Michel approached again, his expression more serious. "Miss Juliana, are you all right? Perhaps I should get you some water? Or perhaps something to eat while you wait?" I looked at him, unable to find the words, and merely nodded, feeling something heavy and unclear begin to well up inside me, a mixture of anxiety, confusion, and some strange, almost childish resentment. I nearly died of shame. It seemed even the walls of the restaurant could see my embarrassment, as if the candlelight on the table had brightened to emphasize my loneliness. I tried to force a smile and said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady, "My family seems a little late, they'll probably be here soon." The words rang false, like a line from a poorly performed play, but even as I spoke them, deep down I knew something was wrong. The feeling rose slowly, like cold water flooding my chest. My family could be late, could forget to buy something, could argue among themselves, but for all three of them, Mom, Dad, and Chiara, to not answer their phones at the same time? No, that never happened. They might be unpunctual, but they weren't irresponsible. Time dragged on, viscous and inexorable. By 7:30, I could no longer sit still, my fingers fidgeted with the napkin, the wine in my glass had gone cold, my phone lay in front of me like my only connection to the world, and then it vibrated, a message, from Mom. My heart sank, then leaped into my throat, as if everything inside me was rushing for salvation. I opened the screen, expecting an explanation. Something sensible, something normal, something to make everything fall into place again. Traffic, a delay, an unexpected incident, but when I read the message, I seemed to catch my breath. "So sorry, dear, we're at the mall, helping Chiara pick out a dress for her birthday next month." I lost track of time. "Happy birthday." I read it 3 times, disbelieving my eyes. At first, I thought I'd misunderstood, maybe the message wasn't meant for me? Or maybe Mom meant to say they were already on their way? But no, it was exactly as it was written. They really were at the mall, choosing a dress, for Chiara, for her birthday, which is in 4 weeks, and I sat alone at a table at Giovanni's, in my new dress, on the very evening that was supposed to be mine, the evening I'd planned, prepared for, dreamed of. I wanted to write them everything. I wanted to pour out onto the screen all the pain, the hurt, the humiliation. Every frozen emotion that had been accumulating over the years, like sediment at the bottom of a glass. I wanted to scream, "How could you? How could you do this to me? This isn't just dinner, this isn't just a date, this is me." But my fingers froze over the keyboard, something stopped me. Maybe it was the fear of telling the truth and being met with indifference. Maybe it was the habit of being the one who doesn't make a scene, the one who understands. I lowered the phone and took a deep breath, trying not to burst into tears right there, among people. I looked up at Michel, standing nearby. He noticed something was wrong and took a step closer. "Miss Juliana, is everything all right?" he asked with cautious politeness. "Yes, everything is fine," I said quietly, feeling the words stick to my throat. "It's just they can't come. Could you pack everything for takeout, please?" "Of course, miss, family emergency?" he clarified softly. "Yes," I lied, "family emergency." He nodded sympathetically, and his eyes flashed with that same warmth I hadn't felt from anyone else today. When he brought the food boxes, I suddenly realized how absurd I looked, dressed up, neatly manicured, with boxes for 4 that would now be shared by just one. I'd ordered 4 main courses. I wanted everything ready, so Mom could try her favorite pasta, Dad could try the roast, and Chiara, of course, could try the chicken parmesan. Now it all seemed like a scene from someone else's life. I paid, leaving Michel a generous tip, not because it was customary, but because he was kind, didn't ask unnecessary questions, and somehow that meant a lot. On the way out, the hostess smiled and wished me a happy birthday, and I nodded, hesitating. My voice would have trembled treacherously. The drive home passed in a fog, car headlights flickered like ghosts, and I turned off the radio almost immediately. I couldn't listen to the music or the lyrics, only the buzzing in my head, mixed with a heavy feeling of emptiness. When I got to the apartment, the first thing I did was hide the bags of food in the fridge, as if ashamed of them. Then I sat down on the couch, and everything I'd been holding in all evening burst out. I cried, for a long time, silently at first, then out loud, with those heavy, convulsive sobs that exhaust you to the point of numbness. I wasn't just crying about this evening, no, the tears were old, pent up, frozen somewhere deep. Everything came flooding back: my high school soccer championship, which they didn't attend because Kiara had a concert; my graduation, to which they arrived 45 minutes late because Kiara had to go see a friend; the promotion party my colleagues were throwing for me. They didn't come that time either, because Kiara had a cold, and my mother didn't want to leave her alone, Kiara, who was 23, not 3. And every time, I found excuses, for myself, for them, for this whole imbalance. I convinced myself that they loved us equally, that I was simply the oldest and should be more patient, wiser, more forgiving, that I was too sensitive, that family isn't a perfectionist, it's real people. But today, something broke. When they chose shopping for Kiara's 25th birthday instead of dinner for my 30th, I suddenly realized. That's it, that's it. My phone lit up with messages from friends, colleagues, notifications from social media, congratulations, pictures of cakes and hearts, but I couldn't even pretend to be happy. I couldn't be happy. 3 days later, I finally felt collected enough to face the world again. All this time, I felt like I'd been living behind a thick window. Sounds were muffled, colors were dull. Even the familiar aroma of coffee in the morning had lost its flavor. I moved mechanically, working, eating, sleeping, and then working again, as if trying to fill the void left by that evening. When my phone rang and Jessica's name appeared on the screen, I initially wanted to ignore it, but my conscience wouldn't allow it. This wasn't the first time she'd written. She'd asked how my celebratory dinner had gone, adding emojis, as if trying to cheer me up. Several other colleagues had also inquired, and I'd told them all the same thing. Something unexpected had happened in the family, and I'd had to reschedule the meeting. Briefly, neutrally, without details. I wasn't going to tell anyone the truth, not even my closest friends, because I still didn't know how to say it without bursting into tears. At work, Jessica was as persistent and lively as ever, as if she had too much sun in her veins to sit still. On Wednesday, she cornered me by the coffee machine, hands on her hips. "Okay, stop sitting at home and moping," she said in a tone that brooked no argument. "Friday, we're going to Murphy's, drinks, music, the whole shebang." I tried to brush her off. "Oh, I don't know," I began, but she cut me off. "You know," she interrupted, "sometimes the best way to celebrate is to just forget you're celebrating. It'll be fun, I promise." I gave in. "Okay, sounds good," I said, trying not to show how hard it was for me to agree. On Friday night, about 10 of us from the office crammed into a huge booth at Murphy's. This place always felt like a refuge after a long week. The smell of fried onions, old wood paneling, music blaring from the speakers, slightly muted by conversation. We drank cheap beer, laughed, told each other ridiculous stories about clients and code bugs, argued about new movies, and everything seemed so simple, so natural. At one point, someone, Martin, I think, pulled a cupcake from a nearby store, lit a thin candle, and said, "Well, guys, not everyone here has had time to congratulate our Juliana." They sang "Happy Birthday" in unison, and I, blushing, blew out the candle, laughing through my slight embarrassment. It was the most humble, the most casual celebration, but strangely, it felt the most real. No expectations, no hard feelings, just people who wanted me to be happy. After the third beer, Jessica, resting her cheek on her hand, said, "Admit it, this is better than that stuffy family dinner you were planning." I laughed, feeling the lightness return to my body, as if the air around me had become warmer. "You have no idea how much," I replied, and she nodded without asking further questions. 2 weeks passed. I was working from home again, background music playing through my headphones, when a notification appeared on my phone, family chat. My heart involuntarily sank. I stared at the screen for a long time, debating whether to open it or not. Curiosity won out. The message was from my mom. "Join us for Kiara's 25th birthday celebration. April 11th, Grandview Ballroom, $2,000 per person donation. Please Venmo by April 1st. Can't wait to celebrate our baby girl." I stared at the text, disbelieving. I read it twice, then again. $2,000 for a party. After everything that had happened, After they hadn't even bothered to come to my place, such a mixture of anger and bewilderment washed over me that I got up from the table and began pacing the room, clutching my phone to my chest as if it were the source of the annoying noise. Are they crazy? I muttered out loud, how could she send that to everyone like it was a party newsletter? Not even a personal message, not even an apology, just a dry invitation, framed like an invoice. I felt a wave of rage rising inside me. I wanted to smash something, scream, throw my phone out the window. $2,000. After sitting alone in the restaurant, waiting for at least one call from them, I remembered how my mom used to say, "You're always so sensible, Julie, you understand everything, you're the strong one," and now, it was as if that strong had become a curse, a convenient excuse to never worry about me again. I sat back down at my laptop, opened Venmo, and found my mom's account. For a moment, I hesitated. I could just do nothing, just delete the message, forget about it forever, but something inside me demanded an answer, albeit ironically. I entered the amount, $10, and wrote, "The best and only gift for you." I hit send, my heart was pounding, as if I'd committed a crime. And then I did what I should have done years ago. I blocked everyone, Mom, Dad, Kiara, their numbers, social media, messengers, everything. If they're going to treat me like I don't exist, well, so be it, I don't exist. The next morning, I called a locksmith. When he arrived, I explained that I wanted the locks changed. He looked surprised and asked, "Lost your keys?" "No," I answered calmly, "I just decided it was time to lock the old doors for good. 2 years ago, when I bought this house, I gave my parents a spare set of keys, just in case something happened, and now, watching the locksmith change the locks, I felt a strange relief, as if I were erasing an old leash, freeing myself. A couple of days later, I caught a cold, or maybe my body finally released all the pent-up tension. I sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, in my pajamas, with a mug of hot tea and my laptop on my lap. I worked as best I could, coughing and sniffling, but still with a quiet satisfaction. Being a developer isn't exactly the life of dreams, but at that moment, for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had everything under control. I was alone, but for the first time, it seemed, this solitude wasn't a punishment, but a choice. And then there was a knock, loud, insistent, so loud that my hands shook, and hot tea spilled all over my laptop keyboard. My heart leaped into my throat, my fingers trembled, and for a second I froze, listening, hoping I'd misheard. But no, the knock came again, even louder this time, more demanding, and the low, confident rumble sent shivers down my spine. I carefully rose, walked to the window, and, barely holding my breath, pulled back the blinds, and froze. They were standing by the door. Mom, Dad, and Kiara, all three of them, as if nothing had happened, as if their appearance after weeks of silence was the most natural thing that could happen. They stood there with that expression on their faces I knew all too well from childhood, haughty sternness, self-righteousness, and a hint of irritation, as if all this were my fault. Mom was rummaging through her purse, and I immediately realized what she was looking for: spare keys. I even felt the corners of my lips twitch in a smile. "Good luck, Federica," I thought, watching her pull out a key ring and whisper something to Dad. There was a metallic scraping sound, an attempt to open the door, another, then an irritated sigh. "It doesn't work," Mom said irritably, and Dad immediately replied dryly, "Try again." Another scraping sound, louder, more desperate. I stood in the semi-darkness, my heart sinking, as if I were watching a scene from someone else's life. Finally, Mom couldn't take it anymore and started shouting, "Juliana! Open the door immediately. We know you're home, your car is in the parking lot." I didn't move, I didn't utter a sound. Silence, so thick you could feel it growing between us, like a wall. Then Kiara chimed in, her voice sharp, with that shrill edge that always gave me the creeps. "This is insane," she screamed, "you're acting like a child. $10, Julie. Seriously? You've embarrassed us in front of everyone." Embarrassed them, it struck me like a bolt from the blue. Embarrassed? They forgot I turned 30, but I'm the family's embarrassment. My mother picked up on her words, no longer holding back her irritation. "If you don't open the door right now, there will be consequences." Consequences, the word hung in the air, and I even chuckled. What was she planning to do? Take away my allowance? Deprive me of my TV? I'm 30, I have my own apartment, my own job, my own life, consequences. That's ridiculous. I took a deep breath, put on my noise-canceling headphones, and went back to my laptop. The sound of knocking and shouting faded to a dull, distant echo. I focused again on debugging the code, on the lines where the logic made sense, where everything could be fixed if I knew where the error was. They fumbled by the door for about 20 minutes before giving up. When I looked out the window, they were already heading to the car. Mom was gesticulating wildly, probably complaining to Dad about her ungrateful daughter, and Kiara walked behind, staring at her phone as if this spectacle wasn't worth her attention. Kiara's birthday flew by. I tried not to think about it, but a tingle of irritation, mixed with curiosity, still smoldered inside. That evening, already in bed, I unlocked her Instagram account, just long enough to sneak a peek, just to take a look, at least briefly, at least to understand what all this was about. The photos show the Grand View Ballroom, spacious, sparkling with gold and pink balloons, garlands, and crystal chandeliers. Everything looked pretentious and expensive, just as Mom always loved, but behind the glitz there was something strange, almost elusive, emptiness. I peered at the photos and realized there were maybe 15 guests at most: Kiara, her parents, a couple of familiar faces, that's all. The enormous hall looked like a giant set without an audience. In one photo, Kiara was holding a glass, but her smile seemed forced, almost artificial, and her eyes were strained, as if she were trying so hard to convince herself everything was fine. Mom and Dad also looked unnatural, their faces frozen in those festive expressions that easily read as fatigue and disappointment. I took screenshots of all the photos, I don't know why, just to preserve proof that emptiness had finally become their companion. Then I blocked everyone again. Later, closer to midnight, the phone rang. The number wasn't immediately familiar, but I recognized the voice instantly. Luca, my cousin, Aunt Patricia's son, a man I once played hide-and-seek with in my grandmother's yard. His voice sounded agitated, almost indignant. Juliana, what the hell happened to your sister's party? I didn't even have time to say hello, he continued, haltingly, but with genuine indignation. Your mom asked everyone for $2,000. My mom called her and said it was crazy, and your mom said that if anyone couldn't afford it, they shouldn't come. They had an argument. Mom told her to shut up and hung up. I couldn't help but laugh, bitterly, almost with relief. Well done, Aunt Patricia, I said. Luca chuckled, but then continued. Then Mom called the rest of the family. It turns out your parents told everyone the same thing: pay up or don't come. So no one showed up. Well, almost no one, except maybe Uncle Terry and Aunt Carmela. Those 2,000, were like chump change to them. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Serves them right, I whispered, almost to myself. But seriously, Julie, Luca added, more gently, what's going on? The whole family is whispering. Your mother's telling everyone you've had some kind of nervous breakdown. I fell silent, and then, slowly, told him everything, about my birthday, about the restaurant, about the shopping, about how they simply didn't show up. Luca was silent for a long time, without interrupting. Then he said quietly, it's terrible, Juliana, simply terrible. 2 days later, Aunt Agatha called. Her call caught me off guard. The number was familiar, but we hadn't spoken in what felt like over a year, and hearing her soft but worried, Juliana, darling, we need to talk, I immediately realized this wasn't the kind of call I'd be happy about. There was a cautious edge to her voice, as if she were treading thin ice, unsure if it would hold her footsteps. If you're calling to say I need to apologize, you can ignore it, I interrupted before she could continue. My aunt quickly responded with a soft sigh. No, not at all. I'm calling because your mother is telling everyone you have mental health issues. I froze. She continued, now more quickly, as if afraid I'd hang up. She says you didn't come to Kiara's party because you were jealous it was being held in such a beautiful place, and that you're making a big deal out of it because of a misunderstanding. I felt a deep anger welling up inside me, and I asked, almost in a whisper, misunderstandings? Seriously? Aunt Agata, they didn't come to my dinner, my 30th birthday dinner. They went to pick out a dress for Kiara instead. I told her everything, slowly, calmly, without accusations, just as it was, about the restaurant, about the calls, about how I sat alone at the table, feeling unwanted even on my own day. When I finished, there was silence on the line, then Auntie said quietly, "I had no idea, your mother never mentioned your birthday." "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry, let me talk to her." I thanked her, though deep down I knew no conversation would change anything. A week passed, I tried to keep busy, completely immersed in work, where code and tasks were clearer than human feelings. We were just finishing an important project, and I was completely immersed in command lines and logic, where everything had order and meaning. But one day, during lunch, the receptionist rang. "Juliana, you have guests in the lobby." I automatically asked, "Who?" And the answer felt like I'd fallen into cold water. "My parents." I went downstairs, my heart pounding louder and louder, and yes, there they were, in the lobby of my office, surrounded by glass walls and neat potted plants, looking like characters from someone else's play. Mom, stone-faced, determined, with that same expression she always wore when she was taking control of the situation. Dad, embarrassed, confused, as if he didn't quite understand why they were there in the first place. "This is ridiculous," Mom said loudly as I approached, causing several heads to turn at the counter. "You're ignoring your family. You blocked us everywhere, that's not normal, Juliana." I gritted my teeth. "Mom, please be quiet," I hissed, feeling my colleague's eyes on me. "She needs psychological help," my father suddenly declared, and his loud, confident voice washed over me with shame. "This irrational behavior needs to stop." I felt a hot wave of humiliation run down my cheek. The security guard at the door had already turned his head, trying to figure out what was going on, and my colleagues, exiting the elevator, slowed their pace. I wanted to sink into the floor. "There's a cafe across the street," I said quietly, trying to speak calmly, even though everything inside was shaking. "Let's go there, we'll talk there." At the cafe, as soon as we sat down at a corner table, my mother began immediately, without even ordering anything. "You're crazy, Juliana. This hysteria needs to stop," I chuckled, looking out the window, where drops of rain lazily trickled down the glass. "Hysteria? Seriously? You missed my 30th birthday to go shopping for Kiara." "It's not hysterical, Mom, it's a fact," Mom snorted. "It was a simple mistake, we forgot. It happens." I turned to face her. "Forgot? I called you 2 weeks before, we discussed it, I texted you, how could you forget?" She didn't blink. "Well, Kiara's birthday is more important," she said calmly, as if that explanation made everything fall into place. 25 is a quarter of a century, and 30 nothing special. Something clicked in my chest, and I looked at her, not recognizing her, but then Dad intervened, as usual trying to smooth things over, but only making things worse. "You're just too sensitive, always have been. Remember how you cried because we were late for your graduation?" I felt a chill run down my spine. "You're an hour late," I replied quietly. I was sitting alone, watching all the other parents hug their children, and I was just waiting. Without blinking, Mom said, "We had things to do, Kiara had a doctor's appointment." I clenched my fists under the table. "An appointment that could have been rescheduled any other day, but you chose that one." Mom leaned back in her chair and shook her head. "You're obsessed with this idea of favoritism, always looking for offense. It's all in your head." I was silent, and then she added quietly, but with such confidence that the words cut like a knife, "You need therapy, Juliana." I looked at them, at my mother, whose eyes no longer felt like my own, and at my father, who hadn't even tried to protect me, and for the first time in my life, I realized that maybe the only thing I'd really been wrong about all this time was hoping they'd ever change. I took out my phone, feeling cold determination gradually push out the last of my pity, and began listing out loud, one by one, all the events where they hadn't happened, all the evenings I'd waited, all the scenes where the empty seats in the front row spoke louder than any apology. I spoke evenly, calmly, but every word echoed within me with pain, like an old wound reopened. Soccer matches where I'd sat in the rain, hoping to see their faces in the stands, science fairs where I'd stood at my booth, watching other children's parents take pictures with theirs, the Dean's List ceremony at my college, where my name was announced and strangers applauded, the presentations of my work, which they promised to attend but didn't because Kiara had dance class, and then I started listing all the things they never missed at her place, the concert at the community center, the cheerleading competitions, her school play, where she only had 2 lines, but they sat in the front row and applauded as if it were a Broadway premiere. "You're keeping score," Mom said with a slight smirk, not looking away, as if it were an accusation rather than an admission of guilt. It's unhealthy. I stood up, feeling a desperate weariness welling up in my chest, that feeling when you no longer want to prove the obvious. I've had enough, I said, trying to keep my voice calm, even though my hands were shaking. If you keep stalking me, I'll get a restraining order. My mother's head snapped up, her eyes widening as if I'd uttered something blasphemous. You wouldn't dare. I met her gaze and replied coldly, quietly, try and test me. I looked at them both, at my mother with her stubborn chin and at my father, who had been silently twirling his teacup in his hands the whole time, as if searching for answers, and said, I don't want to see you, I don't want to talk to you, or even hear about you until you admit you did wrong, and not just wrong, but treated me like nothing for years. I left them sitting at the table, not looking back, feeling something inside me, compressed for years, unravel with every step. When I returned to work, my hands were shaking, the keys felt sticky under my fingers, but inside, there was no longer any doubt. 3 months passed after that scene in the cafe, 3 surprisingly peaceful, quiet months, with no calls, no letters, no unannounced visits. I threw myself into work, finally allowing myself to enjoy the freedom of being in control of my time, my thoughts, and the silence. I met up with friends, went to the movies, even started dating a guy from the gym who once offered me coffee after a workout, and to my surprise, I accepted. Life was strangely calm, almost good, exactly the way it is when you stop expecting to be disappointed again. Aunt Agata became a kind of family go-between for me, a source of news I didn't seek. She dropped by every couple of weeks, invariably bringing her homemade apple pie, which smelled of childhood and Sunday mornings. One day, sitting at my kitchen table, she sighed and said, your mother's latest excuse is that you're going through puberty. I laughed, shaking my head. Agatha was kind, too kind, and sometimes I felt she was uncomfortable being between us. She brought not only pies but also messages I hadn't asked for. It turned out that Mom had started baking again, for the first time in years. Sometimes Agatha would bring pies from her, with that same crispy crust and cinnamon aroma, and say, she hopes she'll try them. I tried them. The pies were indeed good, but the taste of childhood no longer restored my trust. She's trying, Juliana, Agatha said quietly one day. I shrugged. Really? Or is she just upset that I'm no longer playing my usual role, the one where I'm always at fault? One morning, as I was sitting at my laptop, answering emails, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I peered through the peephole with a slight trepidation. 2 police officers stood on the threshold, one tall, one shorter, both polite but wary. My heart began to beat faster. Has something happened to someone? I asked, opening the door. Can I help you? The tall officer pulled out a notepad and asked, are you Juliana Henderson? I nodded. We received a welfare check request from your parents. They claim they haven't been able to contact you for several weeks and are concerned for your safety. I almost laughed. A welfare check? I repeated, feeling a sarcastic laugh welling up inside me. Seriously, officer? I'm perfectly fine. As you can see, I'm alive, healthy, and working. I simply blocked my parents after a domestic dispute. They know why I don't talk to them. Last month, they came to my work and caused a scene. The shorter officer nodded understandingly. Domestic disputes, we get those calls sometimes. We'll let them know you're okay, but if they continue to file false reports, they could face fines. I'm glad to hear that, I said, trying to keep my voice even though I was seething inside. After they left, I sank onto the couch, staring into space, feeling a hot, angry despair rising in my throat. They'd gone to the police. They'd tried to force their way into my life. Even now, this was a new low, a new way of saying, you don't have the right to be yourself if you don't play by our rules. 2 weeks later, I was sitting at my desk, hunched over a report, when Jessica approached my desk, looking unusually uncomfortable and clearly unsure how to start the conversation. She shifted from foot to foot, fiddling with her pen, and finally, quietly, almost whispering, she said, Hi, Jules, your parents are in the lobby again. My heart sank painfully, as if someone had punched me in the ribs. Jessica continued. Security asked if they should be kicked out, but they made quite a scene. They're yelling, demanding to see me, saying you're avoiding them. I exhaled slowly, feeling a weariness spread through my body, not anger or fear, but weariness so heavy it made me want to just close my eyes and disappear, even for a couple of minutes. I went downstairs completely exhausted, and yet, as soon as I saw them, I felt a familiar wave of irritation rise in my chest. Of course, Mom was arguing with the guard, waving her arms and arguing, and Dad was standing a little to the side, with that same guilty, embarrassed expression he always used to conceal his silent approval of her antics. "There she is," Mom announced loudly, as soon as she saw me, and the lobby instantly fell silent, dozens of eyes turning in my direction. "My daughter, who thinks she's too good for her family," she added, pursing her lips dramatically. One of the security guards said calmly but firmly, "Madam, you need to leave the building," to which Mom, her eyes flashing, exclaimed, "I'm not leaving until she talks to us like a normal person." I stood across from them, feeling my insides clench with helplessness, but my voice was surprisingly calm. "Do you want to talk like normal people, Mom? Normal people don't stalk their children at work, normal people show up for promised birthdays," Dad intervened, raising his voice. "You're being unreasonable, everyone can see you need help from a psychologist." My boss, David, emerged from the elevator, surveyed the scene, and, meeting my gaze, said gently but with obvious sympathy, "Juliana, why don't you take the rest of the day? Deal with this." I pressed my lips together, nodded, grabbed my bag, and without another word, walked past my parents to the door. "If you want to talk, follow me," I called over my shoulder. They went, and, as if in some ominous repetition, we found ourselves back in the same cafe where we'd once tried to talk. The waitress, recognizing us, looked worried, like someone who remembers all too well how their previous encounter ended. I sat down without looking at the menu and said, "Say whatever you want, Mom." She leaned forward, as if she'd been waiting for just that. "You're destroying this family." I chuckled. "No, Mom, I'm protecting myself from this family." "Protecting myself from what?" she almost shouted. "We love you." I looked at her straight on, unblinking. "Love? You have a strange way of showing it. Let me ask you a simple question." She frowned. "What did I major in?" I asked. Mom froze. "What?" she repeated. "Well, something with computers," she added hesitantly. I nodded. "Computer science, and math as a minor, and Kiara?" "Communications and theater arts." Mom instantly perked up. "See, I remember," she said, not realizing that she'd confirmed my thought. "Exactly, you know every little thing about Kiara, but nothing about me," I said quietly but clearly. "That doesn't mean anything," my father interjected, clearly wanting to smooth things over. "Yes?" I leaned toward them. "What's my favorite color?" They exchanged glances. Mom frowned. "Kiara's is pink," I added, and there was a moment of silence. Mom tried to brush it off. "That's just nonsense, insignificant little things," but her voice wavered. "For me, it's not nonsense," I replied. "It's proof that you've never really seen me. I've always been the convenient one, responsible, independent, not needing attention, and Kiara is your little princess who needed everything." "That's not true," Mom exclaimed, tears glistening in her eyes. "It's true," I said calmly. "When Kiara didn't get the lead in the school play, you called the director and complained for an hour, demanding he reconsider. And when I didn't make the varsity soccer team, you told me to just try harder next time." My father frowned, looking away. "Those were different situations." "Different?" I leaned forward. "Explain how exactly they were different." He was silent. My mother, too. Only the sound of the coffee machine in the background broke the silence. I straightened up and said quietly, almost calmly, "This is what will happen. I will continue to live without you. Maybe someday, if you can admit what you've done, not just forgetting my birthday, but everything you've done over the years, we can try to start over. But until then, leave me alone." My mother covered her face with her hands, and my father looked out the window, as if suddenly realizing that no excuses would save her. And for the first time in years, I felt neither guilt nor bitterness, but a strange, light, almost tangible sense of liberation. "Juliana, please," Mom said, almost crying now, her voice trembling, as if for the first time she'd allowed herself to admit that all the words she'd spoken before had no weight unless backed up by actions. I looked at her calmly, but somewhere inside I still felt the same tiredness as the day she'd come to work, causing a scene in front of the entire office. "No, Mom," I replied quietly but firmly. "I won't beg for a drop of attention anymore. I won't remind you that I exist, that I'm also a daughter, not a sidekick in your life or a background figure in someone else's play. I won't be in the background anymore. That's it." And with those words, I stood up, leaving them sitting at the table where the half-finished cup of coffee was cooling and where, it seemed, everything had finally fallen into place. I left them there without looking back and went home, feeling a strange, almost icy calm, like liberation after a long illness. That was 6 months ago. Much had changed in that time, though outwardly everything looked the same morning jogs along the embankment, the same office with endless meetings, the same evenings when I made myself tea and turned on my favorite old TV series, only now, internally, there was less tension, less anticipation that the phone would ring at any moment and I would again hear accusations, requests, reproaches, tears. Aunt Agata became my quiet link with the family, careful, kind. Without pressure, she told me the news with such gentleness, as if she were carrying fragile porcelain that could easily be broken by a careless word. Recently, she told me that my parents had started seeing a family therapist, one who, as she put it, specializes in favoritism and family dynamics. I remember her placing a cup of tea in front of me and quietly adding, "Your mother admitted in one of our sessions that they really did underestimate you, that they used to think of you as strong, independent, and uninvolved. She said you always did everything yourself, never complained, and so they just didn't see you." After that, according to Agatha, my mother cried for an hour, as if for the first time she had allowed herself to feel what she had been pushing away all these years. Agatha told this without judgment, simply as a fact, and I listened calmly, feeling neither malice nor pity, only a quiet understanding that maybe someday they would truly begin to see what had been before their eyes for so many years. Last week, Auntie stopped by again with homemade apple pie and said, "Mom said she can't believe how much of your life she missed while you were around." I nodded and replied briefly, "Okay," and I meant it, not because I wanted her to feel hurt, but because maybe she was finally beginning to understand. Chiara, according to Agatha, moved out last month. She rented her own apartment, got a job, and for the first time in a long time, made her own adult decisions. Mom, of course, was deeply affected. Her birdie had flown the nest, as Auntie put it with a touch of irony. She even wanted to write to me, she says, to tell me about it, but Agata held her back. Let her decide when she's ready, and I was grateful for that. Sometimes I miss them, mostly on holidays, when the city is decorated with lights, when the smell of cinnamon and freshly baked goods rises in my chest, and that warm, childish desire suddenly rises in my chest to just call my mom and tell her I'm okay, or when something nice happens at work, a new position, a successful project, and my hand automatically reaches for the phone. But then I remember sitting alone at Giovanni's on my 30th birthday, watching other people's families laugh, hug, and give me flowers, and I realize, no, I don't want to go back to that feeling of waiting for someone to come and notice. My therapist says I'm okay, and I agree. Yes, I started dating someone too, the same guy from the gym. His name is Marcus, and there's nothing over the top or boisterous about him, just calm, reliability, and a gentle strength. He has a very ordinary family, no drama, no favorites, no constant who's right. They actually show up when they promise. For me, this is a truly new concept, a family where people keep their word. I decided that if I'd spent so many years blaming others for not wanting to change, maybe it was time to examine my own mind. Therapy helped me understand a lot. Why I always tried to be perfect, why I was afraid to ask for help, why I thought being invisible meant being safe. My therapist told me that I'd learned to be invisible since childhood, that, having realized that perfect children weren't trouble, I chose this path to survive in a home where love had to be earned, and perhaps that's why loneliness seemed like a protection for so long. Now I'm at peace, I have friends, my job, my little apartment, the only place on earth no one else has the keys to. I'm dating Marcus, and it's slowly becoming something serious. I'm not rushing, not making plans, just letting life unfold as it will. Maybe someday I'll talk to my parents again, maybe when they've been through everything they must go through and can acknowledge not just the day they forgot about me, but the full pattern of these years. Maybe then Chiara and I will have a real connection, not as the responsible older one and the eternally needy younger one, but as equals. Or maybe that will never happen, and, I increasingly think that's okay too, because for the first time in my life, I'm not waiting for them to see me, I see myself, and I think that's finally enough.